Hundreds of innocent postmasters who were wrongfully convicted over the Horizon scandal will have their names cleared under new laws that have been brought forward by the government.
But Alan Bates, the former sub-postmaster who led the campaign for justice, has said that for many cases, the offer of compensation is simply not enough. Let's speak to Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho about that and all the other matters that you are here to discuss, including the expansion of nuclear, of course, which I know is what you are here to talk about. But first of all, good morning to you. Can I just ask you to clarify something, if you can? We spoke to two sub-postmasters earlier, ex-sub-postmasters, who were wrongly convicted and had their convictions quashed, one for theft and one for false accounting. They were at pains to say that this whole system needs to be now, from what Rishi Sunak announced yesterday, needs to be completely independent from the Post Office. They're deeply suspicious, as you might expect, because of their vicious experiences with the Post Office, that the Post Office should not be included in any way whatsoever with the administration of these compensation schemes. Can you clarify for me whether the Post Office is still involved in what Rishi Sunak announced yesterday in those decision-making and the administration of it?
So the way it works is we're going to have a blanket exoneration for victims. That's unprecedented legislation that we'll be bringing forward, we hope, in a matter of weeks. So that will just apply to everybody. And then when it comes to compensation, we've set out a process where you can get a fixed direct sum, which means 600,000 people for most people, 75,000 people for members of the GLO, which again will be directly awarded to you. There won't be any involvement or assessment in that. You just have to sign a statement to say that you are innocent. And for people who want a fuller assessment, that will take a bit more time, but you've still got the option there to be able to get assessment.
Who will be doing that
we
assessment?
Are working with.
I think they're concerned that the Post Office must not be included in the assessment process if they choose not to take the £600,000 and believe they deserve more, or that they are, you know, just taking a legal route as they are to get the right compensation they feel. Is the Post Office going to be involved in those assessments beyond the compensation being offered?
The body that we are working with to make sure that compensation can get paid for as quickly as possible is an independent advisory body. And for the compensation, which is not, as I say, the fixed direct sum, we'll be talking to them to see how we can best do it.
So the Post Office won't be deciding, because their concern is, as you can imagine, that the Post Office have caused this issue. The Post Office have caused all the pain. They both had custodial sentences. They have lost absolutely everything. The idea that the Post Office will still be involved in the decision as to what compensation they deserve is repulsive. You know, you can imagine their concern about that. They have no trust in the Post Office from their experience. They would have no trust if the Post Office are involved even remotely in the decisions that are set to be made.
Well, look, I completely understand that. And everything that we've done to date is to set up an independent inquiry to make sure that we're working with the Independent Advisory Board. And as I said yesterday, we've taken unprecedented steps to exonerate people at a blanket level, i.e. we're doing everyone, so there won't be assessment involved in that.
Do you think it would be wise, though, and obviously more of these stories are coming out day by day as the attention has been brought to this thanks to that ITV drama. Do you think it'd be wise to take the idea of the Post Office being stripped of its responsibility now and this being done by the government or being done by an independent body alone to make the choice as to where the compensation should be allocated and how much it should be, so the Post Office aren't involved because they can't be trusted?
Look, I completely understand that urge for independence, which is exactly, as I say, the work that we've been doing. But we are working very closely with the projects that we've started. So there's an independent inquiry in place, which is looking at fault. And as I said, there's an independent advisory board that we work very closely with on compensation. So those groups are expert groups. That work is underway, and we're working with them to make sure that we can get justice to people as swiftly as possible. And like I said, the steps that we've taken yesterday is to completely streamline that for people so that you get justice across the board for anybody who's been involved when it comes to the legal system, but also direct awards when it comes to compensation as well. Again, taking assessment out of the picture for many.
So just to be clear in a yes or no answer, is the Post Office still involved in any aspect at all of this process going forward? Is anybody who has been associated with the Post Office involved in this current stream of compensation and so on and inquiry? Is anybody involved from the Post Office?
Well, so
yes or no, I suppose, is the answer that the sub-postmasters that we spoke to would like to hear, a yes or a no.
I completely understand that. As I'm not the Minister directly responsible, I would hesitate to say every single aspect as far as I'm aware. But we are working with, as I say, independent bodies that we have set up specifically so we can get people that justice, whether it's the advisory board, whether it's the inquiry, and that is completely independent. We'll gather the facts so we can make sure that we can serve justice.
As you say, that's not your remit, but it sounds like you're not 100% sure on that. But I think that's something that the sub-postmasters and mistresses need to understand. They believe that the Post Office still has too much power with regards to the allocation of compensation. So that's something that maybe you can talk to some of your colleagues about. There's also questions, and a lot of our viewers getting upset about the role of Fujitsu in this as well. Ever since the ruling in December 2019, Fujitsu have been involved in £4.9 billion worth of joint or solo public sector contracts to the government. Most recently, they've been given £1 million to run the contract work on HS2 for the next year, up till 2025. Do you have any concerns that Fujitsu are still claiming billions of pounds of government money, even though it was their software that has created this problem in the first place?
Well, look, I want to understand who's at fault and then make sure that whoever's at fault
Well, we know the software was
pays.
at fault, don't we? We know the software was at fault. We know that it was Fujitsu who created that software.
So if I could just, we have set out, we started an independent inquiry to establish the facts. That will report, my understanding is later this year. And once we have those facts, absolutely, whoever has contributed to the problem should pay. But I do think if you look at what's happened in this scandal, it shows that it is really important that we go through that process of establishing what the facts are, get the evidence in place before we act. But in the last couple of days, we have taken extraordinary steps to make sure that we can support the victims of this scandal as well.
Talking about the expansion of nuclear power, the biggest expansion for 70 years, which is what you're announcing today, there hasn't been a single nuclear plant that's come to completion in the whole time of the Tory government. So isn't this just an idea? Because in actual fact, by the time any of this comes online, as it were, it actually won't help us reduce our bills. It won't help us get to net zero. It'll all just come too little too late.
I would completely reject that. Firstly, energy infrastructure takes time to build. That's why it's really important that you have long-term plans. Secondly, we have been building new nuclear power plants in this country. Every single operational nuclear power plant, I should say, was started under a Conservative government. Where you saw absolutely no investment decisions being made was under the last Labour government. And what we've set out today is the biggest expansion of nuclear power for 70 years. It really is an unprecedented step. And not only are we looking at those large-scale power plants, of which we've got 2 underway, we're committing to doing a third, but we're also looking at the new types of technologies, small modular reactors. We're going to be one of the first countries in the world to have a small modular reactor, which is cheaper and quicker to build. And also, we are setting out £300 million to make sure that we have the ability to commercially produce advanced nuclear fuel. And the reason that that is important is the only country in the world that can do that at the moment is Russia. So not only is that important for our own energy security, our own ability to have the advanced nuclear fuel that we need in the future, but also that of our allies as well, because we cannot have Europe weaning itself of Russian oil and gas for all of us to then just be dependent on them for nuclear fuel.
Okay.
I'm afraid we're out of time, Claire Coutinho. Apologies, because we did talk about the Post Office for quite a lot of that. So if you'd like to come back at some point and we can talk nuclear energy again, and we can get stuck into that, because there's quite a lot to discuss which we haven't had time for. So I do apologise for that, but thank you for joining us this morning.